This is video file number 1 for a property in Annaghkeenty in Keshcarrigan for Helen Marley. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through a brief description of the property. So I have taken photographs of all of the elevations. So that's the front elevation. I'll just skim through them here. The front elevation and the southeast gable wall, and there are photographs of the rear and the, well, I should come back here actually, and I'll just say that the front of the dwelling, or the front here, this is all original. This is all the original structure, and this original structure is built from, the walls are reinforced concrete, or well, I should say they're poured and shuttered concrete. They're not stone walls, they're poured and shuttered concrete, and that tells me that this original dwelling was probably built somewhere in the 1950s. Now if we take a look at the rear, this section here of the rear, this here and all the way back here, so this is an extension. This extension is it's not built from poured concrete. It's actually a blockwork wall, a cavity blockwork wall. So you have a 100mm cavity block, a 100mm cavity, and then I'll start again. You have a 100mm block, and then you have a 100mm cavity, and then you have another 100mm wall. So that's going to be 300mm altogether. And then inside in that cavity, that 100mm cavity, 50mm of the cavity is filled with polystyrene. And that's the extension there. And then there was a more recent extension here. This is your more recent extension here. It was probably built in the last 10 years. Now this is also a cavity wall with 100mm outer leaf block, 100 cavity, and then a 100mm inner leaf block. And the roof is actually, it's a flat roof, and that's actually a slated flat roof. There are problems with that, and I'll discuss that when we go further on through the report. So that's just another view of the rear of the property. These are just overall photographs of the property to start off with. That is the north gable. Okay. Now, so I said already that the walls are, they're not stonework and they're not blockwork. What they are is they are concrete walls that were shuttered and poured on site. And this was quite a common thing for people to do in the 1950s. And you can see it here. This is part of the original structure, and this is one of the gable walls. And you can see that the gable wall has been poured. So it was shuttered and poured on site. And a lot of the way, oftentimes this kind of thing was done before these concrete blocks came in place, before these modular, concrete blocks started to become popular in the 60s. They did this quite a bit. And so oftentimes what people did was they dredged the stone from a local river and they added cement to it, and they just poured and shuttered it on site. So there's oftentimes not too many fines in it, and you can see there that it's quite porous. But at the same time, the walls are they're structurally sound, and there's not really any significant signs of deterioration, so they can be retained. Now this is another view of this is the original structure again. This is one of the internal walls here, and you can see that this wall has been poured. So it would have been shuttered at the side, and then the wall would have been poured. And you can see some of the cobbles inside in the wall. And this is a sketch that I did on site, which just kind of shows you the types of wall construction throughout the dwelling. So this portion of the dwelling here, all the way along here, here, this is all the original dwelling, and it's all solid walls. So there's no cavity, it's just a solid wall. The wall is generally 200mm thick, so it's quite a thin wall, 200mm, and that's quite common for a shuttered concrete wall to be that thin. The extension, this is the original extension here, that was built out the back. This is a slightly different construction. They used concrete blocks were used, and they formed a cavity in the wall. The cavity is to stop rainwater penetration. And so that's cavity. So it's a 100mm outer leaf, 100mm cavity, and then a 100mm inner leaf. And then this here is an extra bit of an extension that was done more recently, within the last 10 years, we'd say. And that one is also cavity blockwork construction. This is again a continuum with just a description of the property before I get into the defects. So this is still just a description of the property. Now I took this, it was under renovation when the property was abandoned. So you can see a lot of the construction. You can see here, this is the concrete floor of the original dwelling. And you can see the membrane. There's a damp-proof membrane underneath the floor, which will help to prevent moisture rising up through the floor. However, there's no insulation underneath the floor. This is a typical view of the new wall construction, or the more recent wall construction. You have a 100mm outer leaf blockwork, and then there's a 100mm cavity here. And then the cavity is partially filled with insulation. And then you have another 100mm cavity here. So in total you have 300mm, and that's typically your external wall. Now to continue on with the description of the roof. So basically they have put a new roof on it. Now it's only partially a new roof. They have put new slates and new sarking membrane over the entire roof, but they haven't replaced all of the timbers in the roof. You can see that these rafters are the original timbers, and you can see by the condition of them that they're the original. They were retained, I suppose, because they're in reasonably good condition. There was no reason to get rid of them. The ceiling timbers are basically new timbers. So you can see they're fresh new timbers. They replaced them probably because they were sagging or they were not in good condition. They've started to put in a bit of a stud wall here just to frame out the attic space. I'll discuss that later. Now if I move on, so again, looking up in the roof space, you can see the rafters are the original. And then these collar ties here at the top they're new. So they've replaced some timbers and kept the timbers that they can. And I'll point out here in this photograph that the owners, or the previous owners, what they appeared to be doing was they appeared to be creating a reasonably large clear space up in the attic by placing these collar ties at such a high level. There is enough room basically to walk upright, unhindered, upstairs. And they've put in these stud walls at the side to support the rafters. But there's, a large open space here. They don't seem to have been proposing to use it as a living space because there's no dormer windows and there's no stairs fitted. But possibly they were thinking about using it for storage. And you could use it for a bit of storage, but I wouldn't recommend using it or storing too much up here, because the timbers are not designed to take a large amount of load. Those timbers, if you wanted to design this for storage, you could have put in 9-inch timber joists, which would have allowed you to use this for storage. But they haven't really done that here. They've used smaller timbers. And this is the wall plate. There's a timber wall plate running along the top of the wall, timber wall plate, and that's used to connect in the rafters and the ceiling joists. And that wall plate is actually almost bedded into the wall, and concrete is sort of poured up the side of that. Nowadays what you would do with a wall plate is you would strap it down to the wall. And I'll show details of that afterwards, where you would strap the wall plate down to the wall to stop it from being uplifted in times of storm. But this is the way they did it back in the I suppose back in the 1950s, and it should be fine. So again, the project seems to have been halted pretty much at they were in the middle of doing the roof. As I said, there's a whole new roof put on. Slates are on, and the sarking membrane is on, but the structure of the roof wasn't finished. It just seems like a peculiar way of doing things. This little stud wall here, they were still adding this in, and that's, they didn't quite get it finished. The stud wall on the other side is put in, but this little wall was partially finished. So that's basically the building description. Let me see. So, overall, I was kind of rating it as significantly below average, because it's not habitable until it's renovated. However, the walls of the structure are sound, so it's it is feasible to renovate the building. So I wouldn't say there's any problems from that point of view. So next I'm going to move on to the observations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video here, and I will continue on with video file 2.